So, Alexis, we have this big idea, right? We're going to launch the Mayo Lab Podcast, and it's going to go where no podcast is gone, we dream. It's going to create content for parents and educators, really delving into how do we help students find and keep the joy they want and deserve. So we have this big idea, and we're going to scour the world for the perfect guest. And in our mind, we're going to bring all these people together and just go through this full checklist. And when we finally arrive on the one perfect guest out of all that criteria, we'll bring them on to the very first episode, except it turned out to be pretty easy, right?
I mean, it was the easiest decision we've made since we launched the Mayo Lab, honestly. There was just one person.
We end up with one. It's Zac Clark. Welcome to the Mayo Lab Podcast.
I've done a few of these things, and that might be the nicest introduction I've ever gotten. So let's party. Let's party. I love that.
Hey, I kid you not, Zac. That's not even buttering you up. I mean, I'd find some other things to say, but we're going to we're going to scour the country, and we have this checklist, right? And Zac, we really think it should be somebody in recovery. We think it's even best if they do some work around recovery. And maybe they're also trying to get to know college students or teens. And guess what? You do all of those. So, first of all, let me ask you, Zac, I think the thing that clinched it, why there were no other contestants for the first guest on this podcast, why it was just you. Last year, you go out and do this college tour at several college communities throughout the country. Let's start there. I mean, what were you thinking, and why do you go do that?
Yeah, the college tour was really, I don't know. That was the brainchild. I just remember early last year, I was kind of sitting around. Look, I've been working in behavioral health care for 11 years now. I feel like I've seen it all, right? And we continue to see, obviously, the suicide numbers and the overdose numbers just skyrocket. And I continue to bang the drum and scream at anyone that'll listen to me. And, last year I found myself sitting there. The news had just broke around Katie Meyer, who was a player on the Stanford women's soccer team, taking her own life, which was just, devastating. And then there were a couple more that followed her. And I said to myself, I was screwed up in college, but I never got there. And I was a college athlete, and I need to know what's going on. We need to find out what's going on with these kids on college campuses. So we threw it together pretty quickly. And really the spirit of that trip was we wanted to do research. We wanted to connect. We wanted to talk to the people who were on the front lines. And what we found coming out of that is kind of what we knew, right? These college age students are desperate for connection. They're desperate for resources to go where you can speak to, someone who's been where you've been before. And they're desperate to know that they're not alone. So it was a crazy trip. We hit 6 colleges in 6 days, and I was tired at the end, but I was inspired.
Yeah. I think the line we often use when people are suffering from mental health issues, substance misuse, eating disorder, depression, they need to be seen and they need to be heard. And I feel like sometimes, I did it as a parent, so many students I get to engage with, I see the same thing happens. They're not seen and heard. And we spend a lot of time as adults telling them how they should feel, what they should do. I'm just so appreciative of you recognizing, because it all starts, in a conversation, as we know, but you got to get out among them. You have to be with them,
I'm sitting here laughing because I'm a total jock. I played 3 sports growing up.
Okay, what 3? What 3?
Football, basketball, baseball.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
And I love the coach that would get in my face and say, "You suck." Right? For some reason that resonated with me. You need to do this. And I loved that concrete in your face feedback.
Right.
And when I started doing this work 11 years ago, I took that same approach. We're going to work harder. we're going to hustle. We're going to be gritty. And like, I'd have guys and girls looking at me like, yo, I don't know who you are, but you need to like calm down. And 11 years later, I have found that in dealing with folks who, and in the work I do with parents, this is one of the main things I talk to them about is like, we all know that the answer you're trying to get to, but if you tell your child what to do, it's a lot less likely for them to do it than if you're going to ask them questions and allow them to have agency over the decision that they come to. And it's really hard for parents. And in my work at Release Recovery, where we work with a lot of families, you know, we kind of take on the role of the parents, right? Because we are their caretakers now. And I work with my team all the time around like, ask questions, make sure they feel heard, make sure they feel validated. We can still say no, but it needs to be no with love and no with a smile and no with like letting them understand that we just have your best interest in mind. It's really hard. The communication thing for me in this work has been one of the toughest things to learn. And now that I have it, I try to give it away.
Oh, right. So you founded Release Recovery in 2017. Tell us a little bit about what's the focus of it? I mean, there's a lot of treatment centers in the country. You're doing some special work. You just noted around the family. I mean, talk to us a little about that.
Yeah. So I got sober August of 2011. You know, I was a heroin addict, smoking crack cocaine. Really what was in it at the end of my run. And I had a family that never gave up. I mean, it got wild for a minute. You know, my parents weren't necessarily talking. My brother wanted to beat my ass, like all the stuff that comes with, active substance use disorder. And, I went to treatment for 4.5 months and I came out and I moved into a sober living. So I was kind of in the container for about 7.5 months. And I came out of that experience knowing two things. I fucking love people. Excuse my language. Like I love people.
Speak the truth. That's all right.
I love people. I caught this bug, like this recovery bug. And I love business. I love like projects. Right. And so I worked for another guy for about 5 years when I first moved to New York City. And then, as it goes for someone like myself, I made the decision to kind of go out on my own. And in 2017, we started Release Recovery, which, it's a tough elevator pitch, but essentially we're a full service recovery organization focusing on, mental health and substance use disorder. So we have 65 highly structured beds throughout New York City and Westchester County. And then we also do a lot of like high touch, high level intervention work, consultation work with families. And so we're really working with families at all stages of the recovery process. So like before their child is in treatment, when they're in treatment, when they come to us after treatment. And then we hope to, have them become ambassadors and fly our flag and be a part of our community. So It's been wild. It's been wild. And I'm just so blessed to be able to do what I do. I don't feel like I ever work, honestly.
Yeah, so I liked your honesty earlier. That's the thing about you that I've heard is you're you. And that's, I think, what people like the most. And that's, I think, why you can make a dent in this tough old world with this work. So I'll be transparent with you and say, when I first learned about you, a couple of years ago, people were telling me about the good work you did. And what I recalled is, look, I mean, you really burst on the scene, I guess, in 2020 when you received the final rose on ABC's The Bachelorette. Yeah. And I think what was interesting in that, Zac, is you used that platform, to address your sobriety on national television, which was a pretty big deal. But even then, I'm like, what's really going on with him? And a friend that we have in New York, a mutual friend, told me, they said, let me tell you what, Zac is the real deal. And he used that as a platform to launch into all this kind of dog with a bone passion,
Yeah, I mean, look, that experience was wild being on national television. I acknowledge and can lean into the fact that a lot of people know who I am because of that experience. And, the love and the romance aside, I'll share this story with you guys. Like, it was kind of the day of filming when I knew I was going to get real about my story. and I knew that that was going to happen to one way or another. And I remember the producers kind of like talking me through it. And I kind of had to stop them and say, like, guys, you don't understand. Like, this is just who I am. So just like you talk to people about your life, I'm going to do the same thing. And I need to lean into that because I don't know who's going to see this. And I need to lean into that for myself because this is my truth. Right. And what has come back to me from that experience and in people kind of seeing me out in the world, continuing to share my story is a lot of love, a lot of hope, and a lot of people saying like, what do we do next? And I think as it relates to family members and the work I do today, one of my big goals in life is to kind of break down the stigma around mental health and substance use disorder. And so what I've tried to do is really show people that this life is not a punishment. Because when I sit a young guy down or a young girl down and they're 15, 30, 3 months sober, and I'm sure you had this experience with your son. Well, how do I date? How am I going to go to the football game? How am I going to do this? And a lot of that shit's fueled by the parents because of their perception of what they want their child to be. And it keeps families sick. So what I've tried to do with all that is really show people that like my life is, I wouldn't trade it for anyone else's. And I don't think about drugs and alcohol today. So,
the parents, they mean well. Like I meant well as a parent, and because we want so much for our children. But it's interesting. Like I tell people all the time, like, look, they say, I'm sure it's hard to get teenagers and college students into substance treatment. I go, oh my gosh, it's like a knife fight in the street, right? And I go, and once you get the parents out of the way, then you got a fighting chance. I mean, I got messages coming in today, a parent, I mean, they want to frame it. They want to believe anything, but they struggle. That's why I think it's so important that people like you, I was in a school in Jackson, Mississippi just last week, and I had a classroom and I asked them, I'm like, what makes the biggest difference? Help us understand. And they said, storytelling. It's storytelling when we can hear others share what they went through. So for you, Zac, I mean, you talked earlier about being an athlete, and you were an athlete in college. I mean, this wasn't just a high school thing, but your addiction, was it ongoing then? When did it really start for you?
Yeah, there's a lot out there, right? Is it genetic? Can you kind of like catch an addiction? And for me, I think the first time I took a sip of beer, I knew that I loved it, right? Like I didn't have this like white light experience because I wasn't like a super awkward or whatever kid. Like I drank the beer and I was like, this is awesome. And so like as that progressed, I showed up on college campus and I kind of felt like I had a black belt in drinking and a black belt in partying because I had partied my whole way through high school.
Right.
So I really wore it as a badge of honor that not only am I gonna, carry on the way that I want to carry on, but I'm gonna bring a bunch of people with me. And it's one of the biggest regrets I have in life is kind of like in college, and look, man, like the leading cause of death on a college campus right now is suicide.
Right.
There are people overdosing left and right. None of that stuff was out. None of that information was out there 10, 15, 6, 18 years, whenever I was in college, right? You work hard, you played hard. And so I think I knew deep down inside that I had an unhealthy relationship with drugs and alcohol. I'll never forget the first time I ever did cocaine. I was a junior in college. And I woke up the next morning and the first thing I thought about is how upset my mom and dad would be if they knew. And that guilt, like that just guilt. And, but I went back out the next night and did it.
Right.
Right. So like as much as like love is important and all that stuff, like I think for a family listening, like, yeah, you can mean well, you can love your child. You can do everything that you think is right. There's no playbook. And I had a beautiful family. I had a beautiful home. I partied my ass off in college because that's what I wanted to do. And that's what made me feel good. But the college campus has changed. There's no doubt about it since I've been there.
Look, I tell people, Zac, in like my son, William, I mean, he ran track, was in the honors college, graduated, and went into treatment. And unfortunately, he died of an accidental overdose. But I have another son who nearly died on a college campus, and he woke up from a coma from a accidental overdose, and he's now 10, 11 years sober. And then we had a daughter who battled eating disorders, an eating disorder in college, and she's now in recovery. And I say, just as you said, the hope is real. But however, things have changed, and it's different. Even you're a lot younger than me, but what I faced and then what you faced, where they are today, particularly around counterfeit pills and counterfeit pills with fentanyl. I mean, the stakes have changed so much.
Had fentanyl been around when I was using drugs, I wouldn't be here. That's just a fact of my existence. I was using IV heroin. I was in Camden, New Jersey. I wasn't checking anything. I was just trying to get the next one in me. And, I don't know what we need to do. And going back to language and communication, I don't think yelling and screaming and telling people they have to learn about fentanyl, they have to, speak up and share their experiences is going to be helpful. But I do know that guys like me and you and what you're doing down there with the center you've opened and the things that we try to do, and this thing shoulder to shoulder is going to be 100% necessary, because if we're at 100,000 deaths now and 75, 80% of them are opiates, and then probably another 75, 80% of that number is fentanyl. It's really scary to see where we're going. We had a case up here in Westchester about 3 weeks ago where a kid was in a high school class and hit their vape, and whatever they had bought was laced with fentanyl, and they overdosed right there in the class. And the teacher had to Narcan him, and the kid made it. But people think this is bullshit. Yeah, and they think it's bullshit. And you've lived it, and I read your book, man. That stuff was inspiring, and the authenticity and realness that you wrote and you laid it on the line, man. I want to be just like you when I grow up.
Hey, okay, now you're giving me a compliment. I mean, but you know what? I appreciate that, and used to be, and you will appreciate this. There was a time when I was early in recovery that I would almost be so embarrassed by that I couldn't accept that compliment. But I think that I have to accept it and wear it, because it takes a village. And I appreciate that. The thing about you is, when that mutual friend we have in New York was telling me about you, they were on fire. They you got to get together with Zac Clark. So I look at this as it's going to take a village to do this. The work you do in New York and nationally, the work we do in Mississippi in the Southeast and nationally. I think the more of us that care so much, particularly about that student beating heart and really reaching them, we've got to come together and try to, get at the round table, so to speak, so that students across this country have real advocates putting their minds and energies together to help them find a way out of this,
Yeah, I mean, I think the landscape, unfortunately, is shifting. It sounds like with your two sons, and congrats to
thank you.
Your son on 11 years. That's awesome, 10, 11 years. I think the landscape has changed recently, unfortunately, which is, it's not just people that are affected by substance use disorder that are dying. It's people on college campuses that are trying drugs for the first time. Right. Yes. They're showing up in Mississippi from Westport, Connecticut, and they're going out to their first party, and someone's putting a powder in front of them, and they're saying, I know my mom and dad will be mad. I know I don't want to do this, but I just want to fit in. So I'm going to do this line of cocaine or whatever it is. And that's how we're losing folks. So the problem is only getting worse. And I don't know, you would know better than me, but the thought of sending a kid to college right now has got to be terrifying. I mean, it just has to be.
Well, statistically, I've seen some research that, students arrive on a college campus anywhere in the country. Often they will try a new substance, Zac, within the first 3 weeks for just what you said. They're out of their element, right? People use substances to change how they feel. They're uncomfortable. They want to fit in. they're uncomfortable, and so they're often likely to make an alignment. And the deal is, though, if we're going to recognizing that, we got to get upstream where we're having more of an impact, where they can really develop that needed emotional intelligence in middle school and high school. So perhaps they come out of high school more fully understanding who they are and what they face. And I think then we can reduce those odds. Right now, to be honest, it is a knife fight in the street because they don't fully understand what they're against. And frankly, I don't think their parents even really understand what they face when you take in everything in the full spectrum that impacts them. Social media, they're sleep deprived, there's counterfeit pills, marijuana is 300 to 400% stronger. There's so much that there's a cliche that sticks around that's called a perfect storm. It honestly is that, you know.
Yeah, it's scary. There's no other way to put it, and it's hard for the parents. And honestly, I think it causes a lot of parents to look at their own behaviors. I mean, like when I lead a family group every other week over here at Release, and I always kind of tell the parents, like, look, there's no playbook on this thing. Your kid is your drug, right?
Yeah.
And like, there's actually a study. I was talking to a colleague this morning going on at Texas Tech around the way that our brains react, right? And so, like, if you take the addict, right, or the identified patient, and you show them a picture of drugs, their brain, the dopamine, they're going to light up in a certain way. And then if you take the parent and you show them a picture of their child, their brain is going to light up the same way that their child's does when you show them a picture of the drugs. And there's just not enough out there for the families right now, and because they're not the ones utilizing the drugs, they're like, well, I don't have the problem. Just send my kid away. I'm going to spend a boatload of money, and someone else is going to fix them.
Mm-hmm. The impact, to be honest, and as you noted in my book, I tell people, I've had some folks say, like, you're not to blame. I said, no, I'm not to blame. However, there is no denying that when I was regularly reaching for drinks at 5 o'clock on, and my children who adored me saw that, it had impact, just as my son today, who's 10, 11 years sober, tells me being able to look at a sober person has impact on him the same way. To blame? No. But as you note, really being able to look in the mirror as a family, as parents, to think, like, what are we doing here? Are we obsessed by changing how we feel with substances? And if we are, it's unreasonable to expect that our children will adopt any different behavior.
Well, the thing I think about when you're talking, David, is like the fact that you are a successful male doing the work that you're doing is just so inspiring, because 90% of the time the moms will show up, the moms will, put in the work, but the dads don't want to talk about it. The dads don't want to be honest about what they've been through.
You're
And just
right.
the stuff that you shared in that book, man, and the work you've done in your own relationships and your own recovery. I mean, it's next level. And, you could go out and have a business dinner with acquaintances. They're not going to know you're sober. And then they find out after the fact, and they're like, holy shit, maybe I could.
Maybe I can
maybe
do
I
it.
could. Yeah, maybe I can do it. Right. I mean, and that's my big, like, right now, like, what I'm trying to do, and it sounds so cheesy, but like, make this thing look cool. Like, make it look cool, like.
I think it's working. What we got to do is, what's fun. That's so interesting you say that, because Alexis, like, I'm sitting here talking to Zac, and it almost sounds like a joke that I'm going to say this, because he's been on national television, multiple episodes, but I still think he is making it look cool, and we got to help him pull the accordion to get across America. Not that he needs that help, but it's so needed, I think, to get that message in front of students that they can, from the person they can relate to,
Oh, yeah. Zac, you posted a photo on Instagram a while ago, and it said sober, not bored. And I was like, yeah, like, let's talk about that. Like, you don't have to sit in your dorm room. You don't have to not go to the party. You don't have to not go to dinner. Like, you can do these things. You can still have fun. And, like, I was a college athlete also. And I remember thinking, well, these are my two choices, is go out or be alone. And it's like, No, let's talk about it. There's third, fourth, fifth options you can do.
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things that has come from the college tour is we were able to make some connections on college campuses with students that are choosing not to drink and do drugs and are choosing to prioritize their mental and physical health, and they are starting to make impact. And then even here at Release, like we've helped to launch a lot of men and women back to college, and then having them come back and share, with us about their college experience has just been,
Wow.
It's been incredible. And it's like my lived experience is that getting sober is not really about what I'm giving up. It's about what I'm gaining. It's about what I'm taking back. Right. And I can share that, like this past weekend I was at a wedding, and it was pretty uptown. It was a New York City wedding. I knew this because I knew a lot of people in the room. 50% of the people there are sober. I know what brought all those people together. Now, if you look at a picture of this thing online, you're thinking these people are partying, they're having the time of their lives. Holy shit, how come I didn't get an invite? Like it looks like a pretty awesome time. But I know the truth behind that picture. I know the truth behind all that is that half those people wouldn't be there if they didn't find recovery. And it's a fine line, man, because like a 19-year-old kid telling him that he's got to get sober in the middle of his college experience, like I don't want to do that. I don't want to deprive them of that like time in their life that you look forward to so much as a young kid. But there's got to be a way to inspire these college students to have a good time,
right,
without blacking out every night.
Yeah, because I ask students, that's such a great point. So many students I get to engage with who are really struggling with substances, I'll eventually ask them, hey, but let me just ask you, are you having fun? And they'll all stop and look at me. I've never yet had one say, oh yeah, I'm having fun. They're all like, no. So let me ask you, Zac, I love the fact that you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and you're pretty hardcore. Let's be honest. And this is a season of Super Bowls and all that. So
I need a program for my sports addiction. People think I'm a nut.
Well, you go to the Sixers. You're Sixers and the Eagles, and you love it, man.
You have no idea. My whole life. It's not. I have Eagles and Sixers season tickets, and I don't live in Philadelphia, and that'll just tell you like
they'll speak it right there.
Yeah.
So okay. So the NFL, for example, a lot of that tailgating culture is built around alcohol. I'm just curious: how do you do that?
I love this question, man. I love it because, again, and I might be coloring outside the lines on this one, and there are probably a lot of people in this world that disagree with me. But my answer to that question is like, how do I tailgate? How do I go to bars? How do I, just like anyone else. Mm-hmm. And there is a movement to create sober events. And I understand that, right? Mm-hmm. I get that. And there are some folks out there who are just going to feel more comfortable walking into an event that is sober. That said, for me, what I try to coach the young men and women that I work with, or even the C-suite executive that I'm talking to about sobriety, is that you can live the exact same life that you had previously. So you can go play golf, you can go out to the tailgate, you can go to the concert, you can do all these things sober, so long as you put your recovery first and you really do the work. And so for me, I do the same shit I did when I was drinking. I get down to the stadium early, I meet up with friends, I eat good food, we laugh, I might have a cigar, whatever it is, I go to the game, win, lose, whatever, get home. The difference is on Monday morning, I feel great, and I remember everything that happened. So I have a big desire to show people who are working towards recovery that you can still run in some of the same circles. And now, obviously, like you have a friend that is doing a bunch of drugs, you're probably not going to want to be hanging out with them.
Sure.
But there is a life that is available and exists where, we can be out there doing the same stuff that we were doing before, so long as, the work is getting done. And that's the hard part, right? That's the hard part.
That might be the best answer I've heard, and I do a fair amount. I'm like you. I get in a lot of recovery circles. I think particularly for our college students, Alexis, like Zac, that's what keeps them so often. They're so afraid of going to treatment, or they're so afraid of putting a scarlet letter, because they're afraid that it will separate them from everybody else, that it will separate them from the fun. I think, Zac, you have just spoken a truth. And like you said, like for some people, they just need sober only events. But students will tell me, for example, I don't really want to go to the sober tailgate. I want to go to a tailgate and I don't want to drink, but I'm not sure I want to go stand under a flag that's a label for me,
Right.
and it's different for everybody. But you have spoken a truth there that I think in this movement of how do we reach students in high schools and colleges where they are, I think it has to start with that. They not only can be on the so-called cool side, they might be. My son Hudson, for example, he's cooler than he ever was.
Right.
He's fly fishing. He's so full of joy. He was pretending trying to be cool, I think, in college, but he wasn't. I heard him
Well,
saying,
I mean,
I heard
no,
him
no,
saying panel.
go,
Sorry.
go.
I heard him saying a panel once, and I want to hear what you're going to say. I heard him saying a panel once. He said, when I would walk to class, Zac, when I was a sophomore, he was a sophomore. He said, when I would walk to class, I thought all the students liked me because they were all nodding at me and smiling. Hey, man, yeah, I only realized in sobriety that they were all nodding at me because I'd been selling them weed.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and like what kind of legacy is that, right?
Right.
That's not going to be eulogized. So he was an amazing pot dealer.
Yeah. Right.
But I just like the number one of the first things that people want to know when they get sober is, how do I date? How do I date? Right? No girl, no guy is going to like me if I don't drink. How am I going to get married if I'm not able to have a glass of champagne? And that's a legitimate concern for the families too. The parents, I mean, you wouldn't believe how much stock, because they think about how other families are viewing them. And I say, and this is my lived experience, if I've been on 1,000 dates in my 11 years sober, and I'm just using numbers, maybe one or two of those women were like, I just can't do, like, if you're not going to drink this isn't going to work out. 95% of them are like, this is intriguing. This is amazing.
Wow.
Maybe I should look at the way and they end up liking you more. Like,
right.
What do they say? I mean, it's, again, cheesy, but like, your vibe attracts your tribe, right? Like, I came to the realization that I don't want to meet my wife at a bar at 2 a.m. I want to meet my, on a Saturday night. Like, I want to meet my wife at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
In a yoga class, like, it's just like, and so like, just, it's a shift in thinking. It's a pivot, not just for the people that are struggling, but for the families too. Like, families are so ashamed. They're so ashamed. My kid's in treatment. What am I going to tell my friends? What am I going to tell the people at the church? What am I going to tell the people, at work? Like, you don't have to tell them anything. It's not your story. Your child will dictate that, right? Like, or whatever it is.
And when it's time, you're going to find that you're surrounded by all your friends and neighbors who've been battling the very same thing. They were just trying to keep it a secret like you.
Yeah. I mean, what about for you? I mean, do you find yourself, I mean, you're living your life the same way you always did, or no? I mean,
so that's a great question. Now I am. Mm-hmm. At first, Zac, it was uncomfortable for me. And at first I didn't know how to go to a party. And people tell me they think I'm social, so that's what they think. I hear that a lot. But I didn't feel very social because I had been trained in my mind since I was 14 years old that if you went to a party, you went with your brain a little bit numbed, But now, so it was a learning process because I agree with you. I desperately wanted my life, and I wanted a better life than I had before. So I realized that I had to learn and take some steps. But so I'll answer it like I wanted it and now I have it. I go anywhere I want to go. And I think I'm more social than I was because when I see you, I'll look at you eyeball to eyeball and I'll hear everything you say and I'll feel everything you feel. Right. But it took me, it's like, it's like yoga. The first time you go, it's pulling on muscles that are a little uncomfortable, but you're learning how to sit into that a little bit, or going to the gym or running. For me, it was muscle therapy. I had to get stronger in it. And I'm stronger today than I was 5 years ago, and so forth and so on. And I think I'll be stronger in 5 years. There's a big concert coming in our community in the spring. And it's, to be honest, there's going to be a lot of alcohol, a lot of other things, but it's a bigger concert than we've had here. And my wife's like, "You want to go?" 5 years ago, I said no, but I'm going. I'm going. So there's my answer. I agree with you. That's why I loved your answer so much. That applies to me. I think that applies so much to students, because the students I talk to, they really don't want the life they're living. They are absolutely scared to death to get there because they don't want to be alone. The night my William died of an accidental drug overdose, I could see his messages and everything, and he was starting to really do well in recovery, but he was alone. He'd gotten off work, and a friend said, "Hey, you want to go out?" He just didn't know how to do it. But the aloneness is what drove the unfortunate result.
Yeah, I mean, they say the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, right? It's connection, right? Like that's you see that a lot, and I believe there's a lot of pathways to recovery, and this has nothing to do with how I personally stay sober. But if you look at something like AA, right? AA has been around since the 1930s, and it's there's a lot of opinions around AA and 12-step recovery in general, but what I've seen in my work is that, AA teaches people who are new to this process a lot about what we don't know how to do. It teaches you to show up early, stay late, sit in the front, get phone numbers, connect to people, say yes. And these are all things that were really hard for me to do when I was out there. Like I wasn't on time for anything. I didn't have any real meaningful connection. And like when you're telling your story right there, like that about William, man, it's like and I remember reading it, like it's just it touches me on a level that didn't exist when I was getting high. It just didn't exist. And so like that, the human connection is just so important. And it's taught me, like, I don't need to like everyone. Like everyone I meet is not going to be my best friend, but I got to love everyone, because I have no idea what's going on at their home, in their life. And that's what I try to live by.
So this family recovery meeting, first of all, congratulations on you. I love that you're not just involved on making things happen. You're involved in the actual happening. So this is this a 12-step based program? I'm just curious, or is it more conversational? Like what happens in that dynamic of that meeting?
I'm laughing because both my coach and my therapist, if they heard what you just said about like you're involved in the hat, like I don't know how I find the time for it all, but I do, because at the end of the day, like I care so deeply. Like if I had it my way, I'd be in it with the clients and the families every day. No, we certainly, I mean, look, we pulled a lot of what we do from 12-step recovery. We also subscribe to the idea that there are multiple pathways to recovery. There's a lot of different ways that someone can get to the finish line. And we try to present our families and their loved ones with options. I mean, like, for family members, when I meet with them, obviously we suggest general family support groups. We suggest Al-Anon. We suggest that they have their own therapist that, they can talk to. We suggest that they make friends and connections with other families who are going through it. So we try to just utilize our experience from both the professional and personal life doing it, and help them see that it truly is a family illness, and I know for a fact. So like if this podcast is really geared towards families and the people listening right now are parents, then the thing that I think that I would say that really hit me between the eyes is when I started doing the family group about 6 months ago as an effort to get more involved with our families, I did it a couple weeks, and then I got home one night and I was sitting in my bed and I was like, why the hell is all the response I'm getting so positive? Like every family on this call is so grateful and so thank you for release and thank you for my case manager and thank you for this. And I'm like, I know the numbers aren't this good. I know the numbers. Like we're not this good. I love to think we do a good job, but like we're not this good. And so I pulled up our client list, and then I pulled up the families who were in attendance, and I started matching them up. And I started to realize the families that were showing up and doing the work had children that were also showing up and doing the work. And the families that weren't on the call, that weren't doing the work, those were the kids or spouses or whatever it was that were struggling. So there's a direct correlation between
absolutely
when the family chooses to dig in and do the work and the outcome for the identified patient. And so like for a family member, it might not feel like there's anything that you need to work on. I get it. You're perfect. And now that your kid is away, you're going to be fine. But the truth is now's the time to even work harder, and that doesn't always sit well with the families, but it's the truth.
It is the truth, and I appreciated again, I can't agree any more than what you just said in that statement. Number one, I love the fact that you're bringing what I'll call a collection of best practices. You're kind of curating and how this family meeting happens. What I find, two things. I have two things, and then I got a question for you. One, I find that some students, I'm going to be very careful. I want to be very careful how I say this because, AA, for example, has saved not just some lives, but tens of thousands and millions of lives, and is one of the most important, entities around the world, and it will continue to be. I hear from a lot of students, this isn't me speaking. I hear from a lot of students who tell me they don't feel that some aspects of that model feel a little dated for them. And so what I take for that is it's amazing and it works, but what we have to realize both in the student family model and in the family model, we may have to look at the connections, as you say. That's been the core of AA. We know that works, and it's the same thing that we have to help these students find. When they're connected with their family, they get better outcomes. When they're connected with peers who support them, they get better outcomes. And that's what I've really tried to help students that I've been engaged with is try not to obsess over the name of this thing, or that maybe just try to get the principle of it, right? And I think that's the essence of a lot of what you're doing around release, and that's fantastic. So then in 2019, you've got Release Recovery growing, expanding how it serves individuals and families, and then you open the Release Recovery Foundation. Tell us a little bit about what the foundation is about and what's the aim of it.
Yeah. Well, I love what you just said, and like I think what I've come to realize is I'm not God. Like I'm just not God. As much as I love to think I am, like I'm not going to get anyone drunk, and I'm not going to get anyone sober. I'm just not. I mean, that's just the truth of my existence. So why not give people options, right? Mm-hmm. And share my personal experience where I think it can be valuable. So the foundation, the timing was crazy. I think, so in 2019, I've been doing this work in and around New York City for 7 or 8 years, and naturally, for whatever reason, I fell into a world where I was really providing services and helping like the middle upper class, right? The people that could really afford a high-end service. And there was something tugging at me to say, like, you got to cast a wider net here. You got to help the people that really can't afford it. And so we got the 501 late December 2019. And then, of course, in March of 2020, COVID hit. So it's like our first event's canceled, and what are we even doing? And you know how life goes, like you keep showing up, you keep saying yes. I get this phone call, I go on television, and I come off of that experience, and like there's this wave of people who want to help. There's this wave of people that say like, my brother, my sister, my aunt, my daughter, how do we donate? How do we, and so like we happen to have this 501, and we started raising money to really be Robin Hood, like pay for people to get treatment that truly
Wow.
can't afford it. And so we really focus on building community. That's like our two pillars are like obviously raising funds so people can access care, and then the other one is building community and making sobriety look sexy and look attractive to the people that need it. And it's been unbelievable. I mean, last year we had 100 people run the New York City Marathon with our name on their chest, and we raised almost $1 million.
Wow.
Which is yeah, it was really
Wow.
cool. We're having our first gala in New York City in May, which you guys will get an invite to. And
We need Alexis. I think we need to get there.
Yeah.
yeah, and so like, and we've also focused on. So there was really two. We have a DEI fund with the treatment center down in Maryland, which focuses on providing funds to the Black and Brown community.
Wow.
Because they are historically underserved. That's what, like when I showed up in treatment, if I'm just being blunt, like I was a white dude amongst a bunch of other white dudes, and 80% of that campus were white men, and I saw it. And then the other group of people is the LGBTQIA plus community, again, just historically underserved. So we have two funds that really focuses on helping individuals that identify in those groups, and then we will do one-off scholarships. I just approved one this morning for someone to get some sober living up in Connecticut. So It's
Wow.
beautiful work. Yeah.
Oh, listen, when you're talking about underserved individuals, I tell people, I say, look, I've been fortunate to get in a lot of treatment centers around the country. I've been able to get in schools and places to see what kind of services are available. And certainly on college campuses, there's equitable services. Here at the, University of Mississippi, where I'm based, we have the William McGee Center, named after my late son, for example. But you just said an important point. If you travel this country and look at treatment centers, this disease is quite equitable. It knows no boundaries. It impacts every human, potentially walking this earth. It knows no boundaries. The treatment that's available across this country, now there's a different story. I get in there and I see a whole lot of faces that look like mine and yours. I love that you're really taking the next step of how do we begin to, because it feels to me, Zac, like there's a lot of growth opportunity for that very same thing, because I know a lot of others besides us feel that same way.
Yeah, the treatment world has changed, and I'm going to make some assumptions on you and say that you're probably a pretty decent businessman. You've probably seen the way that the field of, mental health and substance use treatment has changed over the past 10 years. There's a lot of private equity money coming in. There's a lot of people getting involved that don't know how to spell addiction, and that has really motivated me and my peers to kind of get out in front of this thing as young leaders in this world, because we're going to really carry the torch into the next generation of treatment providers. And there's a way to do this that's right and ethical and above board, and there's a way to do that's really grimy and dirty and gross. And there's, if you put in and that's another thing for families, that like the call that I date, like the one that I get, that I want to get from a family, is the day zero call. I want to get that family who knows nothing about this thing so that I can help guide them. Not the family that's been Googling, treatment centers for the last 90 days, because they're probably just filled up with so much garbage and really confused and really scared. So I agree with you. I mean, like we have a duty to serve and to continue to try to break down walls and barriers in this work, because they say from Park Bench to Park Ave is something they say in New York City. Like it's going to affect everyone in between. And that's my story, man. I'm one of five. I grew up in a beautiful home in South Jersey. I never wanted for anything. And, I ended up bottoming out in Camden, New Jersey with a needle in my arm. And, so like, who's to say it can't happen to anyone?
Right. Zac Clark, what an amazing story. The thing I love about a forum like the Mayo Lab Podcast is this is a beginning. This has been so incredible to hear your story, to hear the work you're doing at Release Recovery, the Release Recovery Foundation, and in other areas. But I think it's a beginning, and we look forward to hosting you on the University of Mississippi campus and seeing where we can dig in and find some synergy to do some, all dig in and try to find solutions for students and families.
No, yeah, my mind's already running, David. I see a world where we're, on stage somewhere, and you're telling the story from a father's perspective, and I'm telling the story from a son's perspective, and whatever it is, and because I know that's where the juice is. I mean, the best doctors in the world, haven't been able to kind of quote unquote figure this thing out. If there was a pill, I would have made it, and I would have been flying down there to see you guys on my private jet today, because I would have monetized it. But there's not a pill. So,
there's not a pill.
Shoulder to shoulder, brother. We get to keep doing this, and I'm just so grateful to you and to be the first guest. That's no one else will ever be able to say that. So.
Yeah, you've made it as the last one standing before. This isn't the first time, but around this subject on this thing, you out of everybody in the country, and I'm so glad we made the right choice, and we look forward to seeing everywhere this goes from here. Zac Clark, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Mayo Lab Podcast. The Mayo Lab Podcast is produced by Dr. Natasha Jeter, Dr. Megan Rosenthal, David McGee, Alexis Lee, and Slade Lewis. This podcast was recorded at Broadcast Studio in Oxford, Mississippi. The show was mixed and mastered by Clay Jones, and our original music was composed by Slade Lewis. The Mayo Lab Podcast is brought to you by the William McGee Institute for Student Wellbeing. For more information on the Mayo Lab, head over to themayolab.com and follow us on social media at the Mayo Lab. If you enjoyed listening to the Mayo Lab Podcast with David McGee, we need your help. Tell others about it. And we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this podcast. This podcast represents the opinions of David McGee and guests of the show. This podcast is not intended to be a substitute for the medical advice of a licensed counselor or physician. The listener should consult with their mental health professional in any matters relating to his or her health or the health of a child.